Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland, where we are devoted to conversations of consequence that help democracy thrive. Today is Tuesday, June 25th. I'm Dan Moulthrop. I'm the Chief Executive here. Thank you all so much for being with us today. We're very grateful to be able to present our forum, which is an opportunity to hear directly from members of Cleveland's Palestinian community. This is a community of people who have relatives and friends in Gaza and the West Bank, people who have been very active as advocates pressuring local elected officials to divest from financial holdings that support Israel and to join other municipalities across the country that have formally expressed support for a ceasefire in the war in Gaza, a war that has been ongoing for more than 260 days. While this war began with the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israeli communities, the conflict is, of course, much, much older. The purpose of our conversation today is simply to hear the perspectives and lived experiences of folks who are on our stage, members of our community living with pain, trauma, and the emotional challenges of knowing that loved ones aren't safe and are caught in a violent conflict in which there does not seem to be any end in sight. Back in October, City Club said in a public statement, "We will continue to support members of our local communities, our neighbors, friends, and loved ones who are scared and grieving, and we will continue to work where we believe we can be most helpful, in convening dialogue that helps our community better understand the issues and events that are unfolding, so all of us can better understand the role we play in shaping our world." It's our hope that today's forum and others that we have presented on the conflict will be seen as part of that commitment. Let me tell you about our panelists. Omar Kurdi is the co-founder and president of Arab Americans of Cleveland Young Professionals Network, a nonprofit that aims to become the resource for Arab professionals in Northeast Ohio. He's also a performing artist and a writer with 2 published poetry collections. He's a proud community organizer and advocate, and in 2021, he was named a Cranes Cleveland 40 Under 40 awardee. In 2020, he was named a 40 Under 40 Arab leader from the Arab America Foundation. He's also a friend of the City Clubs and has been a great advocate and I should say just a friend to us in helping us figure out today's forum. Dr. Shireen Nasser is an associate professor of psychology at Cleveland State University, where she teaches and conducts research around equitable and socially just schools. Dr. Nasser is Palestinian. Her family is from Birzeit in occupied Palestine. Her desire for a more just world comes from her experiences as a Palestinian and the values of her family and culture. Dr. Nasser is a founding member of the Cleveland Palestinian Advocacy Community, a board member of OPAWL, Building AAPI Feminist Leadership, and a member of the Palestinian Feminist Collective. I should mention, too, that a third panelist, Awatif Assad, was scheduled to join us, but she was unable to do so. Moderating our conversation is Nadine Abusada. She's a reporter at News 5 Cleveland, where she covers Brook Park, Berea, and Strongsville, and also the Middle Eastern communities. She is also a proud Palestinian American who grew up on the Louisiana Bayou, which there are many, I'm sure. If you have a question for our speakers, you can text them to 330-541-5794, and City Club staff will work them into the second half of the program. Members and friends of the City Club, please join me in welcoming our panel.
I want to thank City Club for allowing us to have this important conversation. I think you have to live under a rock to not know what's going on in the environment right now. And of course, I want to thank these two for sitting up here with me. Before we dive into this, I just want you to truly know who you're talking to and their connections to Palestine. So I want them to go through and just talk to me about, first of all, what you do a little bit now for Palestine and how you're connected.
Thank you, Nadine. Thank you, City Club. Right now, especially in the past 8 months, most of my work has been focusing on national and federal policy. So I've been spending most of my time in Washington, D.C. and here advocating for a complete permanent ceasefire that ensures that the war ends, the return of the hostages, and that people have the affordability to live. My connection to Palestine is that I am a product of displacement. My grandmother is a Palestinian woman who was forced out of her home in 1948, migrated to Syria, got her diploma in education, moved to Jordan, and became a teacher at UNRWA schools for 40 years. UNRWA, the organization that we currently decided to stop funding. But also, as I continued to learn about my heritage, I learned that my paternal grandparents, that was my maternal grandmother, my paternal grandparents, my grandfather is a Kurdish man, Sunni Muslim, fell in love with a Lebanese woman, Shiite Muslim, and because their marriage was not approved by their families, they sought refuge in the most beautiful city in the world, Jerusalem. And they again were forced out of their homes in 1948 and had to move to Jordan. And the past 8 months have reinforced this connection to this land that I've never been to, that I don't know, that I would love to know. So yeah.
And Shireen, I know yours is a lot different.
I'm a researcher and an educator, so a lot of my work in the past and now has focused on working in refugee camps in Palestine. Also in Jordan, I worked in the Zaatari refugee camp for a while and did consultation there with a focus on mental health and supporting schools in supporting youth mental health. But that work continues for me here. So I work with families here in Cleveland, including Palestinian families, and supporting them as they face increasing levels of discrimination for being Palestinian. It is something that I work with at a national level because we've now seen a 6-year-old who was stabbed to death in a hate crime, Palestinian boy Walid in Chicago, 3 college students who were shot for wearing a keffiyeh, and just last week near my hometown in Texas, 2 young kids who were, there was an attempted drowning because they were Palestinian. So I work with families and schools to help understand how to best serve these students and of all different faiths and religions. But as a Palestinian, my connection to Palestine comes from the land. My family has lived in Palestine for a very long time, for thousands of years. We're an old Palestinian family, Christian family from a town called Birzeit. A lot of people know the town because of Birzeit University, which started in the 1930s as a girls' school by my great aunt. So it's a huge point of pride for me and for my family. My grandparents, on both sides of my family, had to flee Birzeit because of the first Intifada. And they were displaced to Kuwait, where they were not treated any better, and then came to the United States on educational visas, where they established a home. I go back to Palestine as often as I can, which is a hard trip for me, oftentimes because I'm interrogated for hours, sometimes tens of hours at the border, not always let in to begin with. And also just being in Palestine can be difficult, but it's also a place that re-energizes me. In the diaspora, my connection to Palestine is holding on to things like my twab, my tatris, my food, and my culture in order to hand it down as a legacy to my children.
Beautiful. Thank you guys for sharing that. Now, a lot of people knew about Palestine, but let's be honest, following October 7th, it became headlines, the topic of conversation. For you, this is where you're from. It was always a conversation in your homes, but how do you feel your life has changed following October 7th?
I barely focus at work, which sucks. My day job is which is the most rewarding job. I take care of adults with disabilities. We have 2 facilities here in downtown Cleveland and in Parma Heights. And obviously, it's not easy to know that there's probably disabled children in Gaza and that are hurting right now. So life has changed in so many ways. And I remember when October 7th happened. And it was horrific. Innocent civilians were killed. And I'm obviously anti-violence, and I feel like every person deserves the right to live, and we need justice and accountability. But I was worried about the retaliation. And I knew that my life is going to be haunted by this retaliation. And right now, we're talking about almost 40,000 Palestinians killed because of that event. But it also made me determined that we have a very big community here, and that we need to get mobilized and active. And that's what we've been doing for the past almost 9 months. We are trying to advocate for a ceasefire. but what happens after a ceasefire? We need to create a sustainable ecosystem that guarantees that Palestinians live with dignity, self-determination, justice, and accountability. But also, because of some of the connections that I've had, I saw myself spending most of my time in the nation's capital, in Washington, D.C. I've had to sit in some rooms that dehumanized who I am as a person, but I also had to sit in some conversations that were very heartwarming. Some conversations that guaranteed to me that as an Arab American with Palestinian heritage, I'm worthy and I'm deserving and I matter and that my community matters. I sat with people that made very horrible comments, like turn Gaza into a parking lot. And believe it or not, this conversation that I had with Congressman Max Miller, I actually cherished this conversation. A 30-minute meeting ended up being an hour-and-a-half meeting. And I appreciate how we left that meeting. So it taught me that I need to have conversations with people. I need to say what I believe in. I need to be myself. I need to speak my truth. I need to advocate for my people. I need to advocate for all humans. And I'm going to say this right now. I was planning to say it in the beginning, and you're going to hear more from both of us. But literally, all it goes down to is channeling your inner human. And for you to comprehend and understand what is about to be said today, I just want you to be your basic human self, to understand that I believe and we all believe that no one should die. That's it. Thank you.
Again, guys, I do, again, want to applaud them for sitting up here. It is not easy to answer these questions and talk about something so close to home. And I thank you guys again for sitting here and listening. So I just want to acknowledge that. And thank you, Omar, for that beautiful answer. Now, Shireen, I'm going to combine something for you. We talk about October 7th. We say your lives have changed. But when talking about it, this topic of Palestine, it's not black and white. There's complexities to it. There's different governments. There's different regions that an everyday human wouldn't know the differences. It is inevitable that Hamas comes up when addressing this and talking about the Palestinian issue. How do you respond to those questions?
So first I want to answer the question of like, how has life changed for me and bring that into the fold. I'm looking out on this crowd and there are people here that are my family, that are of all faiths, all walks of life, that we have been on the ground working together for the last 9 months with one common belief that justice, when we get justice for one of us, it is for all of us. And as part of the Cleveland Palestine advocacy community, we've done a lot of work to move the conversation to understand, like, what does it mean to allow Palestinians space to speak when we feel like we've been shut down for so long? And I've been doing this advocacy. I went to my first protest at 15 years old. I got spit on. I got spit on by someone telling me I was a terrorist. And that's been a common theme of my life and my family's life, including my father's when he moved here in the late 1970s. And one of the ways that we continuously get shut down is every time we say, what about the 20, sorry, I touch and move my hands a lot, I need to not do that. What about the 15,000 children who have been murdered? And people tell me, what about Hamas? And I can only talk to you from my personal experience as a Palestinian. To me, that is dehumanizing and dismissive. First, because Hamas is not the first armed resistance struggle in the world. Whether it's Jewish people in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, whether it's Nat Turner, whether it's indigenous people on this land, Hamas is not the first armed uprising to happen. So why should I, as a Palestinian, be okay with just laying down to die? Second of all, when I tell you half of the casualties, half of the deaths and murders in Palestine have been children, and someone tells me, what about Hamas? What they're telling me, and someone has said this to me directly, is why don't Palestinians love their children? I'm a mom of 2 young girls. And when I see kids murdered in Gaza, I see my own children. And I have to tell you, when I lost siblings, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old sibling who died from medical complexity, and when I know anybody has taken a child's life on purpose, when I would have done anything to keep my own siblings from dying. It is heart-wrenching. I grieve for all of children who are killed by violence and unnecessary violence. But Palestinian resistance has taken forms of nonviolence for over 75 years. We have stood on our land. Our mere existence is resistance. But what about the town in Berlin? All of you can ask, okay, what about Hamas? And I ask you, what about Berlin? And most people are not even going to know where that is. It's a small town in the West Bank where they protested every day for years until they got the apartheid wall moved so it wouldn't separate farmers from their land. And they had to do that because the military, the area they're in, Area B, wouldn't allow them to appeal to any courts, except for a military court who saw them as cannon fodder. We have had nonviolent resistance here in the United States from our Palestinian diaspora. Boycott, divestment, and sanction is one of the ways we have lifted our voice up to say Palestinian lives matter to us. That justice for Palestinians is justice for everybody. And what happens? People like Max Miller go and they make legislation to silence us and try to make BDS and boycott and divestment and sanctions, a nonviolent protest movement, illegal. So when you come to me and I'm doing my advocacy work and I'm fighting for these children, for these families, and you tell me, what about Hamas? I look at you and I say, what about the Nakba? For 75 years, no one has sought reconciliation for families like Amar's that have been displaced. We have only ever managed Palestinians displaced by the Nakba. We have never reconciled and healed the damage that is done to these families. And then finally, I also just want to say that when we have these conversations, when you ask me, when you want to ask me, you want to have curiosity about what a Palestinian, instead of asking me about Hamas, ask me about how my family has survived. Ask me about how I see the future. Because I do see that future right here in Cleveland, where Palestinian and Jewish folk are working side by side every single day to fight for human rights. I know that our future can be beautiful because when we're at county council and we're sitting outside, my 2 young girls are wearing a watermelon yarmulke from their friend on this side and pulling on my other friend's hijab over here. I know it is possible because I see it right now in this room. So don't ask me about Hamas. That's a dismissive question. Ask me about what do we do next because the Palestinians have been dispossessed and violently oppressed for over 75 years.
Oh, Shireen, I could ask like 20 questions based off of that answer. But I'm going to ask you 2 for both of you. We talk about Palestine and we talk about Israel, but let's be honest, that's on the other side of the world. We're in Cleveland. What does it look like for Palestinians in Cleveland? You mentioned being dehumanized. What does that look like? And how can we change that? How can we move the needle forward?
I mean, as Shireen mentioned, the past 8-9 months, we've seen the community get together, and we obviously have an amazing group of people that have come and showed up to support the Palestinian cause and support the ceasefire efforts and all of that. I have met incredible Jewish people. I've met incredible African American people, queers, you can name it all. I've come across to know. But when you ask about the dehumanization, it's a tough question because, well, how do you define dehumanization when that's all you've known? I mean, in 2023, sometime in October, after October 7th, I was giving a TV interview, and I mentioned that in one of my council speeches. A random person took a picture of me wearing a kufiya and called me a terrorist. I don't know who that person is. Someone shared it with me. And it was a day after a 6-year-old child was murdered in Chicago, stabbed 26 times. And I was like, that man just put my life in danger. That's dehumanization. A woman in Texas drowned 2 children? 2 children.
Attempted.
That's dehumanization. Inviting an extremist leader to speak in Congress in July 24th is dehumanization. And I say this because I spend a lot of time in Washington, D.C. I'm not afraid to sit and enjoy myself and have conversations in the belly of the beast. I enjoy it because I believe in the importance of having these conversations. I told you, I met with Max and I disagree with him on a lot of things, but I left this meeting knowing that I said what I needed to say, he said what he needed to say, and we have a path moving forward. In Cleveland, we need to have a path moving forward. We need our community to understand why civic engagement is important. We need to understand why voting matters, why donating to political campaigns matters. For so long, we've been reactionary rather than thinking of what we can do after, and I feel like we are at a very good time doing that. And I'm hopeful that we will continue to build a good community for us here in Cleveland. We have to live together. And I know we care about what's happening in our homelands. I know we care about what's happening in Palestine, what's happening in Israel, what's happening in Syria, Sudan, Congo. I mean, this world is messed up. But we live in the system that is contributing to that mess. So we can't just be angry about it. We need to be active to actually change things and influence things and make sure that we no longer will fund it, support it, or subconsciously agree with it. Thank you.
So I'm a school psychologist. I got LASIK, so I can't just push up my academic glasses. But so for me, when I think about dehumanization, I start to think about, okay, what does that mean psychologically? And there is a concept called anti-Palestinian racism. And in fact, one of the key features of anti-Palestinian racism is dehumanization. And we see it occur in instances like Walid in Chicago when he was stabbed to death, where someone with a personal relationship with his child removes the understanding of that person as a human in order to commit mass violence. We know that this is a rampant way of thinking about Palestinians broadly. So some of my research, for example, has delved into over textbooks, history textbooks used in Northeast Ohio in over 10 counties, and found instances of dehumanization of Palestinians in these textbooks. Right up to the erasure of Palestinian identity fully, every single map and every single textbook we looked at actually had no mention of the West Bank or Gaza and included Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, with the star and the map, dating back to textbooks that were published in 1980. So we know that this dehumanization is institutionalized, which is what makes it anti-Palestinian racism, because it is in the way that we treat Palestinians not just one-on-one, but also in our system at large. In that environment, it becomes very difficult for Palestinians to have voice in this dialogue at all. So that even if we're sitting with someone who's sympathetic and curious and we want to listen to each other, the playing field isn't level. We're coming from a place where we've experienced oppression, displacement, destabilization. Rates of depression in Palestinians back in Palestine are the highest in the world of any other country. More than 50% of the population, this was a study done in 2023. In 2004, they did a study in Gaza and found that more than half the kids have PTSD. So when we're talking about Palestinians, we're talking about not only are we dealing with these mental health issues, but we're also dealing with this institutionalized racism that inherently dehumanizes us.
No, you guys are giving so much great information, but we talk about this a lot. We talk about the echo chamber, right? People who are Palestinian, people who grew up among this. They know all of this. What about those on the outside? What is the first step for them? How can they start these conversations? How can they be a part or learn? Because again, as I mentioned, for those that grew up in it, this is everything around you. But for a lot of people, this wasn't on the radar until October 7th. What is the first step for them?
As I said before, I am open to conversations. You need to ask questions. You need to come with an open heart and mind and be willing to learn. You need to channel your humanity, and to understand that no human deserves this. We might not agree on everything. We can disagree with everything. But we just need to have the basic decency to understand that a world that is okay with 40,000 people, half women and children, probably more, are killed is not a world that I want to live in. It shouldn't be a world that you want to live in. You want to ask questions? I am always more than happy to answer questions. You want to dine with a Palestinian? You're more than welcome. We're very hospitable people. You want, and Shireen is a great cook, by the way.
You are.
She deserves a round of applause. Off topic, but I did weight loss surgery, so I'm on like soup. So Shireen has made me soup to like survive. But anyway.
Omar's an open book, if you can tell everyone. Open
But
book.
because
whatever
I'm
you
a
need.
human. I'm a human. This is who I am. Like I told you, I'm a product of displacement. But I am here. I live in Cleveland. This is my home. And if we're going to live together, whether you're on my side, whether you're on a different side, whether you're on like no sides, we need to fully understand that we both deserve the right to live. We both deserve justice, equity, accountability. And it could happen when we channel our inner humanity and we have an open heart and mind. I'm going to go a little longer. Like yesterday, I had a wonderful conversation with, I'm proud to call her a new friend, Ilana Ratner. Never met her before. It was like a short meeting. We ended up talking for 2 hours. We disagreed on things, we agreed on things, but what we agreed on is that we're humans and we believe that no human should die, no human should be killed, and that humanity is what matters. And that's a good, very, 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 very good step. See me as a human, and wallah, that means I swear, wallah, I will give you all my love, all my attention, all your answers, and we can work forward from there. Just see me as a human. That's a great first step.
You're not going to tell us about any surgeries, right?
No, I'm not going to
Okay,
talk
good.
about my surgery.
Just making sure. All right, go for it.
I'm no stranger to difficult conversations. Working in schools, particularly in schools who have deliberately had resources reduced. I've worked in communities in this country, including Black communities, Latine communities, that are constantly having to fight for even a modicum of resources that their communities deserve. And having these difficult conversations is a way of life here in the US. So when I come to someone and want to have a difficult conversation, the first thing I ask them to do is have some curiosity. Because if you're holding an umbrella and it's raining, you might be like, oh, it's not wet outside. And that umbrella can be a metaphor for privilege. The privilege of $3.8 billion a year being sent to a government in order to buy weaponry. The privilege of being able to walk into legislative spaces and be like, your legislation matches what I want. I don't have that privilege as a Palestinian. So if you are in conversation with me, what I ask is you come with curiosity. That I'm going to tell you things about being wet and not having that umbrella that are going to be really hard to hear. But ultimately, that I truly believe from the bottom of my heart that if one of us can be free, all of us can be free, and that it requires justice for all of us to see this world go into a better place. But that cannot happen for one person to be safe and another person to not be at their expense.
Whew. Hope you guys are ready because it's not over yet. So, I'm not the only one that's going to be asking questions today. We are now going to begin the Q&A, and for those that are live stream audience or those that just joined, I'm Nadine Abusada, reporter for News 5 Cleveland, and I am your moderator for today's conversation. We're hearing from two key voices right here in Cleveland's Palestinian community. First, we have Omar Kurdi, the president of the Arab Americans of Cleveland Young Professionals Network, and Dr. Shireen Nasser, Associate Professor of Psychology at Cleveland State University. Again, a round of applause for these two. So, before I say this next thing, I want you to remember they are human just as you are. So we welcome questions from everyone. City Club members, guests, and those joining us via our live stream at cityclub.org. Text it to your friends, maybe. If you'd like to text a question for our speakers, please text it to 330-541-5794, just in case you missed it. Again, it's 330-541-5794, and City Club staff will try to work it into the program. Now, may we have the first question? There's microphones on either side. Who am I going to the right or to the left? I'm a right-hander. Okay, we're going here. What you got?
Hi, I'm going to start and model good behavior by keeping it to a question, not a statement, because there are a lot of people I want to hear from. I'm coming into this question with the framework of thinking about militarism, thinking about racism, and thinking about capitalism. And I think a lot of people who live in the United States and a lot of people with privilege think if we get the militarism and racism piece down, that we can live in a world that we think is acceptable. And I've been really inspired by the Palestinian youth movement and the young people on college campuses because they're talking more about the role of capitalism and how that can contribute to those things working in tandem. Do you think that we can have the peace we have by leaving capitalism alone? I know it's complicated because a lot of people escape oppression through capitalism, but I am just curious of your commentary on the role of capitalism and how that exists in the politics here locally and then globally. Thank you.
You guys got that? I'll take that. Okay. When the United States sends $3.8 billion a year to support the Israeli military is required to buy those weapons from the United States. So the dollars from our labor, our tax dollars, are then filtered back to private companies. This is one of many ways that capitalism supports oppressive systems. We are living in a time, and I'm not here to I'll just say this. This time right now is the most dysregulated capitalism has ever been in the United States, which means there are no guardrails. I have been working with families. My first job in high school was an after-school program. I have been working with kids for over 20 years now, and the situation for these families has never been more dire. Poverty is on the rise, while wealth is increasing elsewhere. And this is directly related to the issue of Palestine, because our ability to have these conversations is directly related to things like selling weaponry to continue these ongoing wars all over the world, including the Congo and the Sudan, etc.
Who do we have next over here? I say you have a red shirt on.
Hello, my name is Zizwe Chaguka. The U.S. Congress recently passed a law that equates criticism of the state of Israel with being anti-Semitic. I'm also a student of history. My understanding that Semitic people are Arab-speaking people. Also, they seem to equate Zionism with Judaism. I would like for you to respond to why do you think this U.S. Congress conflates all these things into one, and is it true that a Semite is in fact an Arab? Thank you.
Thank you for that. It has not become a law yet, but it passed the House. Let me say this. Anti-Semitism is real. Islamophobia is real. Anti-Arab hate is real. All of that is real, and I stand against it. However, I don't think it's fair or logical that a criticism of a foreign government should equate anti-Semitism. That means that when you go and criticize Saudi Arabia, for example, I'm going to accuse you of being an Islamophobe. I said that in the White House in one of my meetings. I literally told them I will dedicate my life to make criticism of Muslim countries acts of Islamophobia if that's what we're going to do. Second, all of us in this room, are being politicized. As a Jew, your faith is being politicized. As a Muslim, my faith is being politicized. As a Christian, your faith is being politicized. And all of these things being mixed up together is because we're being politicized and because they're gaining something out of it and they're creating division to create more control of our society and so we can no longer live together and work together. So if I was a Jew, I would reject that, but again, I'm not, so I don't have a say over that. But if it was reverse, if it was a law that would make a criticism of Muslims an act of Islamophobia, I would be the first one to stand against it. I'd be like, that's not fair, that's not logical, it doesn't make sense.
Can I add to that? Can I add to that really quickly?
Yeah.
I know we're really tight. It's so hard to have this conversation in such a short amount of time.
I'm like their timer. I'm like,
I want to be really clear that anti-Semitism as a concept of anti-Jewish hate is a unique and specific thing that exists in this world. And also that anti-Semitism is on the rise, that some of the highest rates of anti-Semitism in the United States are happening right now. We just saw the Tree of Life synagogue shooting happen. I also believe that equating anti-Semitism with criticism of the state of Israel is part of how we continue to see anti-Semitism flourish. Because we are not addressing the fact that anti-Semitism lays the foundation for white nationalism, which hurts everybody in this room. Are we good? Okay.
All right, I have a question over here, sir. Blue, I'm gonna go with
Thank
blue.
you so much for the three of you being here. And this is particularly for Dr. Nasser. So my husband and I are the fathers of an 18-year-old who's leaving for college. High school was difficult because last year she was being constantly asked, if you want me as your Jewish American friend, you need to give up your Arab American friend, and vice versa. Help me be a super dad. Give me a simple piece of advice I can give her when people ask her to choose.
Well, you're already a super dad for coming here to try and get advice, so let's start there. Sorry. Round of applause. All right, Shireen.
I'm gonna tell you what I tell my own kids, because even my 3-year-old at this point understands what's going on. You do not have to choose between people, but you do have to choose between systems. If you have a system that is perpetrating injustice, I hope my daughter will always stand up against those systems. But I hope she never equates one person with an entire system.
I'm going to follow up here. So is it something more of like seeing them as individuals, seeing them as a person, instead of connecting them to, or no? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, there are individuals who will take on the narrative of a system and carry that as their own narrative. And that just doesn't have to be. So if you're talking to someone and they disagree with you, understanding with curiosity where that comes from. For example, for me and other Jewish people, something that connects us is the trauma of displacement. That is a fear that we all share because of our histories, but it does not justify my oppression. And that is a conversation I can have with an individual, even if they hold ideologies of a political system.
Got
right?
it. Okay. All right, let's go over here.
Hi, I'm Ilana Horowitz-Ratner, and I had the pleasure of meeting both of you last evening. My question is, here we are today in Cleveland, as Clevelanders, both Jewish and Palestinian. What concrete steps can we take to move forward to live together in harmony in Cleveland?
Thank you. Thank you, Ilana. I think that meeting we had yesterday could serve as that step. We need to have conversations. And I believe that we need to have conversations with people that we can disagree with. But again, like I said, see me as a human, I'll see you as a human, and that's a very, very basic first step. And once we start having these conversations, once we start building trust, once you start understanding that all oppression is not okay, once you start understanding that Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza are going through horrific situations, once you understand that checkpoints are not okay, once you understand that building an apartheid wall is not okay, once you understand that Arabs that live in Israel are not even allowed to sympathize with their Palestinian families in Gaza and the West Bank, or they could get arrested, then this conversation could happen. There's a lot that could lead up to having this conversation, but see me as a human, I'll see you as a human, and we can move forward. We live in Cleveland. We have a responsibility towards the city. We should not live in a hostile city. We should all be fighting for the city. We should be all fighting for equity in the city. And we all pay taxes. We're all gonna suffer the same. Whatever government that's gonna come to govern us, we're all gonna be under the same stuff. And if you're a Jew, you're a Muslim, you're a Christian, whatever you are, you're queer, you're not, we're all going to go through the same thing. So why spend more time fighting with each other and not willing to understand each other than rather finding a meeting point that could lead us to a better life here in the city? If we're not happy here, where are we going to go? Like, some people can't even go back to Palestine. I have family in Jordan, but like, I could go back there. I don't know, but like, what I'm saying is, like, if we're not happy, or if we're not creating an ecosystem here that believes in who we are as humans, then what's the point? So I really hope that people after today do reach out to me, because I am open. I am ready to have a conversation, because 9 months is way too long. And it's not about that. It's about the upcoming months here in Cleveland that I feel that I should fear for my life, or some people should fear for their jobs, or some people should fear for being persecuted or for being fired from their jobs, or like being attacked on social media just because they have different viewpoints.
Okay, sounds good. And then who do we have? We have one over here.
Yes. Over 5 years ago, here at, the other building at the City Club, Gaith Al-Omari spoke as a Palestinian scholar being involved in the peace process, talking about how difficult it is to create peace in the Middle East. A lot of conversations are happening now about the day after. I'm curious, what are the conversations within the Cleveland Palestinian community about how they want to see the governing bodies of the West Bank and Gaza after the war ends, how they want to see Israel exist next to a Palestinian state? I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Can you guys answer this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can only speak from my own perspective because I can't speak for the whole entire Palestinian community. But what I can say from having traveled there a lot, working in refugee camps and being a scholar of youth in general, including in Palestine, that I stand for a one-state solution. I believe that all refugees have a right to return, no matter where they're from, including Palestinians. And I believe that if we are going to have a peaceful future, we must address the violent past. There must be reconciliation, there must be healing that comes from the Nakba. We can't continue to ignore it like it didn't happen. And I also believe that there are many people calling that land home. And what that looks like, we're going to have to keep working on it just like we're working on it in this room. But that cannot come until we've reconciled the past of the Nakba and the displacement of Palestinians. And I believe that one-state solution where all of us can have equal representation, just like we do here, is one way we can create a democratic future.
So your idea is finding a way that Jews and Palestinians can coexist. That is what...
I don't have to find it, I'm living it. I'm living it right here in Cleveland. And I think, Alana, when we spoke, one of the things that struck me in our conversation is that your grandmother's Palestinian. We have to be real about what is happening on the ground, including the treatment of Palestinians. You're talking about 75 years. I mean, I could sit here and take up this entire question talking about the violent brutality that Palestinians have faced. My cousin is being held, is being detained indefinitely in an Israeli detention facility. She's 24 years old. The last woman who was let out of an Israeli detention facility had to have both her legs amputated from the torture she endured. We cannot pretend these things don't happen and then just say, okay, we just need to move forward and get along. We have to have the tough conversations, and people on the ground are. There are folks, Jewish folks in this room, as well as Palestinian folks in this room, who have done work in the West Bank, who have worked with Palestinians on the ground. It is possible. But we must do that through acknowledgement of the violence of the past.
Okay, I think we have time for one or two more questions, so we're going to come over here.
Assalamu alaikum. Real quickly, what do you say to critics of BDS as a nonviolent form of resistance who label it anti-Semitic or accuse it of singling out Israel?
What I can say is, when people resist militarily, people get mad at them, attack them, call them terrorists, call them violent. But when people choose to protest non-violently, people are trying to label them as anti-Semitic. You can agree or disagree on the topic of BDS, but I think it's a granted right for Palestinians and people who believe in the Palestinian cause to ask for an economic boycott of Israeli products so they can bring attention to the Palestinian cause and to the Palestinian struggle. It's not anti-Semitic. I don't believe it's anti-Semitic. I think we've all boycotted. I mean, Republicans wanted to boycott Nike because of the kneeling down and all of that stuff. So does that make them anti-American because Nike is an American company? I don't think so. So boycotts have always been a form of nonviolent protest, and I think it's a viable source of protesting.
I'll add. I just want to add and continue on my conversation of where power lies in this situation. It is not with Palestinians. And there are systematic efforts to continue to ensure that Palestinians do not gain political power, do not gain voice, or even social and cultural power. Silencing our resistance in every single form it takes, including boycott, divestment, and sanctions, is one of those ways. I attended a Jewish Federation conference when I was in college, and to just listen and hear. And on the agenda, over and over and over again, was how to break down BDS on campuses, on college campuses. How about asking about the conditions on the ground in Palestine and how we got there? You talk about boycotting an Israeli settlement. Why would someone want to boycott a product that comes from an Israeli settlement? Maybe it's because in order for that settlement to be created, it had to displace Palestinians. It had to create military zones so that Palestinian farmers can't access their land. Maybe because it takes water. So now the Palestinians around the settlement are unable to access water for their animals, for themselves to shower. When we talk about boycott, divestment, and sanctions as Palestinians, this is one of our methods to reach and bring power and voice to our community. And people who are trying to silence that and criticize it are just trying to silence us as Palestinians' ability to fight back against an occupation or a resistance.
Thank you very much. I just want to quickly follow up on the last questioner over here about future. And whether it's a one-state solution or a two-state solution, who or what organization inside the Palestinian community is going to take, can you see, is there somebody out there who can take on the leadership role that's necessary to advance the process?
So, there was a survey that went out and finished on October 6th. It happened in Gaza and the West Bank. And one of the results of this survey on October 6th was a couple of things. One, that majority of Palestinians wanted to see Marwan Barghouti as a leader, who is a political prisoner currently, a Palestinian political prisoner. We also have other leaders like Ahad Tamimi, right, who has been imprisoned. You know who they didn't want? You know who had the lowest rating of all the political parties? Hamas, on October 6th. When we talk about our future and we talk about our leaders are being systematically cut down. In 2009, Netanyahu gave a speech to the Likud party, and he told them, you know, the number one way we can ensure there will never be a Palestinian state is pit the leadership against each other. And that is exactly what they went on to do. Our leaders are being imprisoned, killed. Shireen Abu Akleh, one of our most important reporters, American citizen, shot and killed. We have beautiful, important leaders on the ground in Palestine. We need the oppression to stop in order for them to be able to take on that beautiful leadership.
We're going to take one more, and then I have a closing question for you guys that we talked about. So I'm going to come to you. We have no order. We're going to the left. What do you got?
Hi there. My name is Jeff Kassouf, and I'm a member of the Arab American community here in Cleveland. I'm a Catholic. And my question was directed at the panelists, but also the whole room. You know, we're talking about the future, and I think me and many others were very interested when we saw one of the sponsors tonight was the Anti-Defamation League. And for those who don't know, there is a history between the Arab American community and the Anti-Defamation League going back to the 80s of profiling, targeting, and harassing Arab American community leaders at no fault of their own, simply for their political views. Is there any concern today amongst Arab American and Palestinian advocates that similar profiling and targeting is still ongoing? And how can we prevent this and look toward that very bright future that I think we all want? Thank you.
Before you answer this, I'm going to say one thing. This is a welcoming space for everyone. I understand your sentiments, but this is a welcoming space. So thank you to everyone that is here, and we're not going to point anybody out. I want to make sure we address that, because in order for us to have this conversation, we have to be respectful and welcoming towards everyone. So I hope you guys do know you're welcome, and we are happy that you are here as well as everyone else. So I appreciate your question, but I do want to address that, because that's the point of this, to have these conversations and make sure everyone is welcome and that we are respectful. I'm gonna let you guys take it from there. Remember, we got one more question after this.
I would also add that there is a difference between being unwelcoming and then leaning into uncomfortable conversation. And I appreciate that question because we do need to get uncomfortable. That's where change happens. It is true that the ADL on a national scale is one of the primary groups that has worked on silencing Palestinians. It's also true that the ADL has made very racist comments against queer communities and black communities and has tried to change that. And inshallah, you being here today is one way that you can see how the ADL has silenced Palestinians in the past, including by labeling things like standing up for Palestine as anti-Israel. Can you think how that makes me feel as a Palestinian? To see that me standing up for Palestine is not seen as being Palestinian or pro-Palestinian, it's then labeled as anti-Israel. I also think it's deeply dangerous that the ADL conflates all criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, because then it makes the numbers, like me as a researcher, when I go to make sure that I can see anti-Semitism, it gets conflated and diffused, and I can't identify it so that I can address it. So I hope that organizations like the ADL can lean into these uncomfortable conversations so we can see change, because silencing Palestinians is not how we create change.
Okay. Again, guys, you came here to be uncomfortable. That's what this is about, but to have these conversations, so thank you. All right, I stole the last question. I'm selfish, you can say it, it's fine. But the reason why I stole it is because when we have these conversations, I feel like it gets lost what we're talking about. We're talking about Palestine, we're talking about Palestinians, and being Palestinian is more than October 7th. It is more than the oppression. It is more than the occupation or what's going on around the world right now. To you, when you think about being Palestinian, what is it to you that you would want this audience to hear? Because guys, look, it's just like the dessert on the table. We gotta end it with something sweet, come on. Okay, I'm gonna start with, I don't know who's gonna go longer between you two. Ahmad, are we talking about surgery or what?
No, we're good. This is a tough question because you're asking me about a place that I have only known from pictures and stories from my grandmother. My grandmother, who is from Safad, left in '48 with 750,000 other Palestinians, eventually settled in Jordan and died in 2020 without ever going back to her home. When I think of Palestine, I think of my grandmother and all the women like her. Because Palestine is a mother. Palestine is a strong, resilient, powerful, hopeful, beautiful, colorful, engaging, healthy woman. I see Palestine in my grandmother and her stories. I see Palestine in every Palestinian woman that I know. And I hope that one day I could be able to put all of this in, and see it in real life. So, thank you.
Green.
Palestine, to me, is my legacy. My family has been displaced multiple times. This thobe I'm wearing, in a different world, it would be my grandmother's. This was made by a machine because my family has been displaced so many times. Palestine, to me, it's the last thing that I have to give my children. It's the food on my table. It's the thobe that I'm actually stitching by hand now and learning how to make. It is the trauma of watching and the grief of watching so many of our people brutalized, so that my kids can know to stand strong against any brutalization of anyone anywhere. It's sitting down at the table with all kinds of Palestinian women, tarol wada doali. Our food is a labor of love. It's simple ingredients, but very technically heavy. It's every time something happens to me, it's 20, 30 people calling me, coming to my house to check on me and my family, because we're a collectivist society. Palestine, to me, is when the Cleveland Palestinian advocacy community does anything, even our non-Palestinian members are suddenly Palestinian, saying things like inshallah and eating with us and showing that care and love. Palestine, to me, is home. And I, inshallah, one day will be able to take my kids to see that home.
Thank you guys. Again, thank you City Club. Again, I hope we left you with thought-provoking conversation for you to take on from here, but also to remember that though this is a place of war, there's still lots of conversation. There are people there that this truly impacts. So I appreciate you all. I appreciate all of your questions. Thank you for the space. And of course, thank you how much, Shireen and Dan.
Thank you, Shireen Nasser, Omar Kurdi, and Nadine Abusada. Thank you all for being a part of this today. Forums like this are made possible thanks to generous support from individuals like all of you. You can learn more about how to become a guardian of free speech at cityclub.org. We would like to welcome guests at tables hosted by Arab Americans of Cleveland, ADL Cleveland, CARE Ohio, Cleveland Peace Action, Cleveland Public Theater, Jewish Voice for Peace, Mace Islamic Center, MACOM, and the Young Latino Network. What a great group of organizations. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're off next Friday, July 5th, for the holiday break. We'll be back on Wednesday, July 10th, right across the street to kick off our free summer outdoor series. We'll be hearing from Rosemary Moudry. She's the new executive director and the first executive director of the Cleveland Public Market Corporation, which runs the West Side Market. So come, be a part of that free conversation. There will probably be a food truck nearby. Mike McIntyre of IdeaStream will moderate that. And on Friday, the 12th of July, Michael Jeans with Growth Ops will be here to talk about his vision for a greener and more inclusive future. Growth Ops just received a $156 million grant from the EPA to ensure that every community across Northeast Ohio has access to solar energy. You can learn more about each of these forums and everything coming up in the month of July at cityclub.org. That brings us to the end of our forum. Will you please have another round of applause for our panelists and our moderator. Okay, thank you so much, friends. Have a wonderful week. Our forum is adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.